All right, it's great to be with you all. This is our last in-person meeting option for 2023, and so glad many people made it, especially with the rains. And I'm glad to be here also. Before I went into retreat, I will say that I wanted to talk about commitment, in part because with the APT program beginning, and people trying to make decisions about it, I had a lot of discussions about what are people going to be committing to if they do APT. And so I had thoughts, and the retreat was on the 5 faculties, and I thought, oh, these are good things to be talking about, what you might be useful as faculties to commit to, and as faculties to support your commitment. So on one level, what we're committing to is practice. What do you need or want in practice? I would say is one way to start to figure out what are you committing to. And the 5 faculties, which by the way, when we did, was it this year? Time is, or last year when we did the Heart of the Buddha's Wisdom, wasn't it this year? Or, okay. So we did cover the 5 powers, chapter 24. So they are called the 5 faculties, the 5 bases, or the 5 powers. I might even go as far to say the superpowers. So they start out as faculties or aspects that are useful for practice, that support your practice, and they are faith, or saddha, that's Pali, or sadra in Sanskrit. And then there's virya, or energy or diligence. Then there's mindfulness, which is sati. And then there's concentration, samadhi. And then there's wisdom, which is prajna. So in Thich Nhat Hanh's book, he talks at the beginning, talks about, if you remember, how as children, when it rained, they're just happy to be in the rain or eating the bowl of rice that the mother makes me. And then just a sense of happiness. But as you get older, you start to have things and you're like, oh, I lost my happiness. I lost my sense of completeness and wholeness. And home, he actually says home. And so the 5 faculties, or the 5 bases, are what can remind you, or what can bring you back to the paradise that you thought you lost as you've gotten older, as you've grasped onto things and become more, give yourself a sense more of suffering. Not that we don't suffer as children, mind you. This is, in a way, many of us obviously suffer as children, but the sense of, I think what he's bringing up is not necessarily an age thing, except for that sense of we many of us, the majority of us probably, have some sense, can have some sense of completeness and wholeness. Just like, remember the Buddha, when he sat under the rose apple tree, had that sense of completeness and wholeness. Right? So these are, and here he calls them power plants, because one way that people talk about how the 5 faculties are, they are what nourishes practice. And in the nourishing of practice, they become power. So as you cultivate them, this is why he uses the analogy of plants. Cultivating these plants, they then nourish you, and then they also give you energy or power. Right? So faith is the first one. And there is some So first I should say that this retreat is with Bill Fronsdal, who's one of my teachers, and with Andrea Fella, this is a retreat I go to every year well, as many years as I can at IRC. And I'm there too, I think the best teachers for me. And so I will be using some examples from them, perhaps a little bit, and I'll just say that I'm spitting out my own words, and I'm sure there's some echoes from them. So I'll give them some, as much as I'm aware that they're direct things from them, I'll note it, and I'll just say that given the 7 days of submersion in their teachings, I'm sure what comes out of this mouth is not on my own. It ever was. So just that out. So faith is often the first one, and there is some movement that these are put in this way. Of course, like anything in the Dharma, it isn't necessarily linear, and it's useful to understand that when you have faith, it gives you energy, which then supports your mindfulness, which then supports you to concentrate, and in concentration, you develop wisdom. And you could say then wisdom gives you faith, and so keeps you power, the power that keeps things going, or as the Dharma is often talked about, onward leading, right? So to me, I always say that some people, like Andrea said that she thought wisdom was the one that supported all five the most. I myself think faith is the one that gets us going. And when we think about faith, probably many of us think about it as some kind of religious faith, right? And maybe even have a kind of reaction to it. I will say that for a long time, I was like, on a certain level, I can't believe that I'm a priest. Like in my early day, I would never have thought that, I would be some kind of religious person, right? And yet, the more and more I practice, the more and more I have faith in the Dharma. And with that faith, to me, as some of you might have heard me on that side say, I feel like I'm starting to preach, not, because I really find it something that I have a lot of trust and faith in. It's that kind of trust and faith. And as we practice, we develop trust and faith, wouldn't you say? What brings you to practice, especially when you have doubt, hopefully. So these bases or faculties are something to remember that you can connect with. None of these you don't have, right? When you were young, maybe you had faith in what? What might have you had faith in? Something that gave you awe. I think that's another way of understanding faith. It gave you a sense of awe. Anybody want to say anything? Any kind of faith you had as children that you thought about? Maybe in your parents? Maybe even at church? I mean, I enjoy going to church. Yeah, sure.
Faith in nature.
Nature, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone online, if you do, can I have to speak up or raise your digital hand because I can't see you all. Okay. Right. So faith can give us energy. Now, Gil's great because he's a scholar and he studies Pali and the sutras and all that. And yet he's also like, oh, but, you can also, whatever it is for you, within, you can't just, if I say faith, you can't go, ants. Ants are faith. Although I just asked you, maybe have faith in ants. But you can't go too far off. But in some ways, you can use what kind of words that can invoke that in you. For him, for his retreat, he used the word love, right? And if you think about that with practice, you develop more faith. You say with practice, I would say, and I think it has happened through the pandemic and certainly this year, is that I have developed more confidence and trust in love. Right? So remember, I also have defined faith as strengthened confidence. When you develop more confidence and it gets strengthened, it becomes faith. Now, a while back, a person who studies Zen in Chicago interviewed me, right, for a social work and Zen practice thesis he was writing. And then he follow up, and he used the word love. I can't remember the context. And I was like, I'm not so comfortable with love. And you have heard me talk about metta, like, yes, the common translation is loving kindness, but I always say, oh, no, kindness. Love is too sticky. Love is too sticky, right? And so, and yet, in a way, faith is what supports us to work through the stickiness, right? Because it's when that stuff is hard that we have to have some faith that there's something here. Not even at time we might think that faith or that work is to unstick ourselves, but in some ways our work is actually to get in closer and closer to what is the stickiness, so that the stickiness doesn't become an obstacle. Right? What is it that is hard for me about love? It gives, if we lean into it, if we just say, well, that's sticky. Neediness, let's say. Neediness in love. For many years, I'm like, one of my early Dharma talk, I remember, was like, needy. This song is all about needy, and I can't be needy, right? So needy is in love. Most of us would go, neediness in love. Probably in psychology, of course, being a therapist, right? If someone came to you and say, oh, I just met somebody and they're so needy, you're probably going, right? Be careful, be careful. Probably not as a therapist you would say that directly, but you might start to go, there's something to watch out here. And yet, what we want to do is we want to lean into what is our reaction to neediness. What is it that brings up for us? I know for many years I did not want to be needy, right? Because I need to be self-sufficient in life. I need to be able to depend on myself. It was very hard to depend on the other. And yet, as I pushed that away, I actually needed it. There was something I wanted to be able to depend. And yet, because of my experiences, it was hard to depend on people. And so that became something too sticky, because I couldn't be with it in a concentrated or mindful way. I couldn't deal with the energy of that. I'm using words. What kind of words am I using here? The other bases or the other faculties. I didn't have the wisdom because I kept turning away from it out of fear, out of revulsion, out of aversion. And yet, when I actually leaned into, a lot of time through therapy, about that neediness, it was a need I didn't have met when I was young. Right? And so I need to cultivate the need in myself. How many of you, when I first started the meditation, I said, what do you need or want? Some part of you went, need, I don't need anything. Or what is the difference between need and want? How many of us just keep going, need and want, need and want, too much stuff around that. Is it okay to want but not need? Or is it okay to need but not want? And when is it okay? It's just all like, right? And I don't have an answer for you, not a cookie cutter answer. But when you lean into it, in each context, what might be there that you can strengthen your confidence about? What gives you the power to be able to have some sense that the difficulty, in this case, I'm calling stickiness or neediness, that the problem is something that if I turn to, there is some wisdom there to be revealed. And that takes energy. It takes energy to lean into and face our habitual reactive tendencies, our karmic energy. It takes energy. And it doesn't just take any kind of energy, it takes diligent energy. And part of diligence energy isn't just energy, because it's about what is an energy, what is diligent, what is the word diligence that's different from just energy? Yeah. Steadiness.
Constancy.
Right? Diligence takes steadiness, or as Suzuki Roshi's word, constancy. Practice takes constancy. It isn't just a matter of diligence, right? So it is about what? It is about, are we mindful of the kind of energy we use, when we use energy, the quality of energy, where do we put it, how do we use it? That takes concentration to really bring some consistent awareness to it. And then that brings us the wisdom so that we can discern when or where or how or what kind of energy is needed. And that also changes with conditions. So diligence doesn't actually just, on one level, it could be, this is diligence, equal but consistent, but it also could mean, oh, sometimes it's a little bit, sometimes more. And the diligence is also the steadfastness, the willingness to stay. You say diligence also gives you, and what about commitment? Steadfastness is part of commitment. Faith is part of commitment. I mean, you could say faith is commitment on a certain level. Oh, I wanted to read what Thich Nhat Hanh said about diligence, because I hope I didn't kill that bug. It says the second power is diligence, the energy that brings joy into our practice. How many of you, when I talked about diligence before, even thought of the word joy? This is why I wanted to read it. I made myself a note. Most of you are like, in so many years, right? I'm like, right? And for myself, so much of practice is about seeing how I over effort. Right? It wasn't joyful. It wasn't joyful, my practice. And it can be the same. When is any period you sit down, when is there not joyfulness in it? Or relaxedness, or you have to enjoy your practice, or else you're going to give up. Right? These are faculties to help you balance so you stay with practice, so you don't give up. Faith gives birth to diligence, and this diligence continues to strengthen our faith. Animated with diligent energy, we become fully alive. Our eyes shine and our steps are solid. Right? So yeah, you have faith. A lot of times we learn things, wisdom, right? This is how most of us approach wisdom. That's why everyone loved it when I said, we're going to study this book, because, oh yeah, I got to know. And I love this book too. When this book came out, I love this book, because, oh yeah, the 3 this, the 4 this, I'm going to learn it, right? And this is how we approach wisdom. And it's a fine approach. Then we're also, oh, yep, I'm going to apply. How many have already, oh yeah, next meditation, I'm going to be applying what she says. I'm going to put it into practice, right? So we want to apply it. I'm going to do it right. Oh yeah, there was no joy in my meditation. Now I'm going to have joy, right? I'm going to have joy now because I'm supposed to have joy or else I shouldn't do this, right? So now you're like putting, this is the kind of wisdom you want to apply it. Then, now I have to go ask Reverend Lien exactly when should I have joy, and am I having too much joy? I mean, I actually went to a teacher once and said, am I having too much joy? It's like, in a way, what a silly question, right? We part of wisdom, we get it from, what was the word Andrea used? That sometimes wisdom, when we start wisdom, is called borrowed wisdom. And it's fine. We borrowed it from the sutras. We borrowed it from others. You borrow from me when you're sitting here right now borrowing some from me, right? Right? So it's okay. And yet that borrowed wisdom has to become personal wisdom, has to be experiential wisdom. And not just experiential, but that kind of wisdom that is beyond, more than experience, in the sense that it isn't just, this is why Zen, I appreciate Zen, because Zen is about intuitive knowing. That knowing that is beyond or more than just experience. It's something you can't quite put words to, but you have faith in, you know it in your gut. There's a faith in it, a confidence in this. Now, mindfulness, or sati. So remember that classically mindfulness or sati means to remember. Gil called it, and he said, and it's true, I've heard this before, that of course I took a course on him on mindfulness years ago. So he's always been like, mindfulness, I don't know why that came, well, he does know why. A lot of the English translation came from 18 whatever, I can't remember his name, in Sri Lanka. They're somebody or another. I'm not a good historian. We translated from wording of the King James Bible. So mindfulness came from the King James Bible somewhere. So the word sati got translated to have this sense of much more of a mindful, but don't forget that in Buddhism, mind and heart are not separate. So it's a much more of an embodied kind of awareness. Right? So Gil likes to think of it as one, awareness, more than just a mind kind of work, and then conscious awareness. And you've heard this when we've talked about mindfulness before, right? Or Joseph Goldstein used to say, well, a Labrador is aware, but that's not necessarily, the mindfulness we're practicing. It's just kind of like awareness, right? Mindfulness is directed, conscious awareness. Not to put down, Labradors are great. They're without, not as a, okay, I'll just leave that alone. But, a conscious awareness, an intentional awareness. I'm using the word intention. Let's see what Thich Nhat Hanh says. Don't forget that sati is Pali and smriti is Sanskrit. Their power is mindfulness, or smriti. To look deeply, to have deep insight, we use the energy of right mindfulness. Again, don't forget this is right mindfulness or skillful mindfulness. Meditation is a power plant for mindfulness. When we sit, eat a meal, or wash the dishes, we can learn to be mindful. Mindfulness allows us to look deeply and see what is going on. Mindfulness is the plow, the hoe, and the irrigation source that waters insight. We are the gardener, plowing, sowing, and watering our beneficial seeds. Oh, the opposite of mindfulness in a lot of the suttas is heedlessness. So when you're not careful, when you're not consciously aware of what you're doing, how you're practicing, what is your awareness? I'm going to say a lot more about mindfulness, but I won't right now. All right, so we go to concentration. or samadhi. Samadhi is often thought of as stability, and I appreciate that word. And in fact, like in the book, I use stability. My concentration is classically a unified sense of, it's not just concentration as we know it, like I'm concentrating, reading a book, but it's a unified sense of being very focused, not just one-pointed focus, but it can be wholly focused, right? In fact, Yo was, towards the end, was calling it wholeness, a wholeness of being able to be aware of what's going on in a way that's unified. It is often, samadhi is also considered composure. Now, if you think about it, faith can give us a sense of purpose, you could also say, as faith, right? Virya gives us the energy to enact that purpose. Even the word purpose gives you that sense that there's energy behind it. Mindfulness directs your purpose, right? And concentration, kind of like it hones it. It gives you a sense of the fullness of it. And it unifies what is your purpose, what you're aware of, how do you know the faith, how do you enact the faith. So we do that because in concentration, in the sense of wholeness, we start to get more insight. Now, insight is, in a word, on a certain level, you could say the word vipassana, of course, means insight. And don't forget, V means steady or consistent. Passana is clearly seen. So a steady, clear seeing. Right? It helps us to have a sense of precise knowledge, and which is wisdom. Wisdom, so we start out with borrowed wisdom. We start to experience it. We start to, I was thinking of the word actually that came to me is acknowledgement. I think acknowledgement is a good word for wisdom. What do you think? It has knowledge in there. To know, but it's not, and to know knowledge, but it also, how do you acknowledge what you know? Because most of us are just going, okay, I know this, and it's a thing. And wisdom is not a thing. I mean, wisdom can be. This is a book of wisdom, right? So it's in the book, but it isn't dead knowledge. It has to be experiential knowledge. It has to be lived knowledge. So, and so much of our work is to acknowledge what we're not willing to know. Is that not so much of our work? That's how we get insight. We go into it to get to acknowledge what we didn't know before, or what we weren't willing to. We also, wisdom, if you think of it that way, is we acknowledge where other ways of knowing, other people's way of knowing, other people's way of not just knowing knowledge, but knowing themselves or knowing their experience. And what happens then is with concentration, we start to be more inclusive. And so we allow for more awareness and knowing. Now, as many of you know, I have oatmeal stories around retreat. Haven't heard an oatmeal stories for a while, huh? Thanks to the pandemic. I have an oatmeal story this time. Now, IRC is an insight retreat center, by that the practice of insight. So they have, you know, like a buffet line kind of food, not oryoki. So at IRC, the teachers always make oatmeal for breakfast. You have oatmeal, and then there's a whole bunch of condiments, and then there's toast and stuff. But basically, unlike, you know, more hoity-toity places where you can get fancy eggs and stuff on different mornings, they just have oatmeal. That's the main thing. But don't worry, they have a lot of condiments, right? And well, two things about oatmeal. One is, oh, and I'm of the old school of insight, in which I only take one bite at a time and then I just chew. I put my fork down, you know, or spoon down, and I just chew. So I'm fully aware of my food, right? So it takes a while to eat. Right? I'll tell you, every morning, halfway through, I go, why did I take so much food? Why did I take so much food? Because I'm already full and I still have half a bowl of food. And because I'm me and I like to blame it on Zen, I have to finish my bowl. Because in Zen, of course, we have to finish our bowl because we have to clean it, to put it away, right? You don't get to go swoop it away somewhere in Zen. You gotta eat it. It's your karma. You gotta eat it all. And every morning I see my karma in the bowl of oatmeal. Right? By the way, at lunch too, my plate, I'm always like halfway through, I'm like, I'm full. But the buffet line, you know, it's now that I'm starting to think about it, you know how I say that lunch is like the worst part of, you know, where you can suffer the most, and oryoki is because you look up and you see everything. I realize now the buffet line and insight is where they make you suffer the most, because each morning I go, okay, I'm going to take less oatmeal. But then what happens? There's granola, there's sunflower seeds. This year they had plump raisins. Then there's, so much vegan food now at our seat. Before it used to be a little bit if you were lucky. So they had vegan yogurt every morning, plenty of it, not just a little. Then they have fruit. Then they had 3 kinds of milk. And then you go on the condiment side, right? And have cinnamon. They have Burris yeast. They have salt. They have on and on, right? And so my bowl just every morning, I'm like, how did I get here? How did I get here? So my bowl oatmeal is not my finest hour of practice, though it was very tasty, I'll have to say. Right? Now the other one, I will give myself a little credit, and by this I mean that the practice matured, perhaps became a power. Right? So in the what's the word? The thing they say about the 5 power, that's why it's called the 5 powers and the 5 faculties. As they develop, as you cultivate them, as you strengthen them, they become power. That means they not only power your practice, but they give you the power to keep on practicing. They don't just empower your practice, but they grow your faith, they grow your energy, they grow your, that's why I could say it's your superpower. The other thing is, of course, at all these retreat centers, or many of them, they have the Corningware because it's light and it runs through all the things. So, and they have metal spoons, which means what? Noisy, really noisy. I do not sit in the dining room. I sit in the big room, which is twice as big as the dining room, and I sit as far away from the dining room as possible. By the way, you all know, because I've confessed over and over, what is my hindrance? What is my favorite hindrance? Ill will, right? Aversion and ill will. If you didn't know, you know it now, right? So aversive, as far away as possible. And I'm of the old school and of the Zen school. So you do not make noise with your utensils as you're eating. So I put my spoon down quietly. I scrape without noise occasionally, but quiet. I chew quietly. I set my coffee cup down without noise. Slow, mindful, concentrated, full of wisdom. Of course, there was a person. Click, 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 scraping, scraping, scraping. And I literally put my stuff down and went like this the first day. And then, I tried to just go like this because I found myself going like this. And then I've had to pretend that I wasn't like going, so do this with my head, right? Second day, same spot over there. And I was just like, but I got lucky on the second day. I was suffering, and then I thought, oh, what's my favorite hindrance? Aversion arising. So I could laugh, still annoying, but I could laugh. Third day, where does she sit? Next to me. But there was a long, technically it's an altar, but people think it's a table. So she sits next to me, but I don't know, 5, 6 feet away. Noisy, noisy, noisy. And I'm like, okay, okay. Fourth day, she sits next to me, like this far away. I'm not exaggerating. There was a little table yeah, see, some of you who are aversive types too, right? It's just like, pardon me, I was concentrated enough that I thought, oh, I think she's gotten a little bit more quiet. Then, of course, being a Zen person, did my mind get quiet? Or did she get quiet? Huh? Right? The flag, right? So, did my mind get quiet or did she get quiet? But it was, it was like, okay. I started to send her metta, then I was like, no, just more quiet. Fifth day, it was so quiet in that room. And I missed her. I was like, where is she? Where is she? Then I heard her in the dining room, right? I heard the noise, it was further away, but I was like, oh, that's where she was. And I was like, oh, it's okay. She's all right. Huh? I don't know. I don't know if this is a good story about the 5 powers. But I think that concentration, a little faith and love, don't forget the love part. I actually really appreciate that. What if we thought about faith, right? What drives your practice? What if it was love? What would give you energy? Love. What is that thing that brings you mindfulness? If you're mindful about, not just in yourself, but with others, love. What would you concentrate on? What would you make the wholeness of your life? Love. What if love was the wisdom that you want to really know, to acknowledge? And the other thing that I think that could be this superpower that makes us a superpower. And I admit to you that I always pause because I say, what is the word? And acceptance always comes up first, but that's not the word, right? What if it's acknowledge, then acceptance, and then appreciation? By the sixth day, I appreciated the oatmeal person. I appreciated that she was there. Right? And so I think we could say commitment is, are you willing to have faith? By the way, I've been talking mostly about practice, but I haven't forgotten what I do in meditation. What are you practicing for? And notice I didn't say life. What do you need or want in living? Not life. Life is now. One thing. Here's my life. It should be like this. But what do you want to be living? How do you want to be living? This is better. What is it that you need or want as you're living? I'll offer to you that there's acknowledgement, which takes some acceptance of what is. In some ways, our practice wisdom is to know what is. And then with it is a kind of, see, I'm already pausing. It's a hard one. That's the other way to know. The sticky stuff you want to lean into, that's where you want to bring more consciousness. And then the stuff that's like, it's there. I'm not quite sure. Appreciation. What if you woke up every morning and appreciated your life? And have faith that that appreciation will give you the energy, and that you're mindful that appreciation is in living. You appreciate living, you want to remember that you appreciate that you're living. You want to concentrate on appreciation in your life. And you want to develop and discern how it is that you're living in appreciation for life.